Good afternoon. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Three important thank yous. The first to the Sangat that has come out to share with us, the conference participants and organizers. I want to give a big round of applause to all of you who've given up your time today to come and join us, so thank you very much. Number two, to all the fellow colleague conference participants and volunteers, your dedication has made these last 3 or 4 days very enjoyable. Gurpreet was reminiscing, it's the best Western he's ever been in. I said it's more about how everything was organized for us. We just kind of wake up, come down, breakfast is there, colleagues are hanging out, we're talking, we're going to get picked up, a car comes and picks us up. I mean, that just makes the experience just the best, right? And so really appreciate that because we got to hear stories of colleagues and the children going to school and starting kindergarten and stuff, and then over dinner getting to see pictures of family members. Doris showing pictures of her daughter there, and I said, well, I'll let her know because I'm going to say your mom was showing us to say, should I put this on Shadi or something, right?
What do you think I was doing?
Exactly, right. And so we all give up our time and energy and family and personal and professional commitments to be here, and so a big round of applause to all the volunteers and participants. And obviously, last but not least, Michael for organizing all of this, and I know each presenter keeps saying thank you, but we can't say thank you enough for giving us this opportunity. I think anytime you bring a concept of something together, it allows for synergy of expression and ideas, because the one thing that we've lost as a community is the concept of Sabbat Khalsa, right? It was an important concept spiritually where the community would come together and share ideas and engage and plan for the future. And outside of, unfortunately, forums like this, you would really have to ask yourself, where is those spaces now where we come together as a Sangat and as a community to engage, discuss, challenge? And so those are fundamentally important, and right now these are some of the spaces, the only spaces around for us, and it's really important. So big turbans off to you. Oh, I won't take it off actually, but anyway. And then he was introduced, but not, you don't really know, but Gurpreet's my boss. He's a member of our board of directors at the Sikh Heritage Museum of Canada, and he has joined me on this conference trip because we're also heading up to Edmonton to put on this exhibit tomorrow, so we're driving out today. And so Gurpreet, thank you very much for coming out. It's always interesting how people get into research, academia, and history and stuff, and I won't say mine is special when I say costly, because I think we heard Ali speak about picking up a mortgage on his house, and I haven't done that yet, so maybe Ali has the cake on that one for me. But these journeys really take us, and sometimes everything we have, even from a personal level, becomes part of our commitment to what we're doing. And for me, it was collecting, and every single time I started collecting another piece of Sikh history and artifact, it grew my stories and storytelling and ideas further and further and further and further, and now I'm just buried. And so part of the idea amongst a number of us in Toronto was that what's the next phase for us when we have these objects? And it was threefold. One was to make sure that we're not collecting to put them up in our houses or just bury them in little cases in our houses, because it's not going to necessarily serve anybody. Unless you come to my house, and I don't have anything really up in my house on my walls, it's not going to serve anybody's purpose. So let's have a spirit of collecting for the greater good of our community and the greater community. Especially as I'm going to be sharing some of the narratives of the Canadian Sikh history piece, because our story, our history is connected to Canadian history. We are Canadians. And so that's one aspect. The second aspect is to make what we do with the objects greater than the object in of itself. And so when the call comes out, to make our resources available, and we have constantly done that to create phenomenal resources. And every single resource that gets made becomes another legacy part of the Sikh Heritage Museum, because everything needs to be archived. Sometimes today's pieces don't feel like much, right? And it's only 30, 40 years from now, we are looking for those exact same pieces and those exact same Calgary newspapers and all those little pieces, try to bring them together and have them as a great archive piece. Because as I was sharing with some people around here, the Security Museum concept now is starting to grow across Canada, and a lot of people are interested to know how they can localize that piece. And so you can always have a localized component and other things that are similar. So it's important to recognize that aspect as well. And speaking on those terms, I would be remiss if I don't at the beginning make sure I recognize that one of the larger Sikh collectors in Canada is sitting amongst us right here in a local Calgarian, Sikh Saint. And if you just raise your hand, so because I'm trying to make them a little bit more public, right? Because it's important. We need to know what resources are in the community so we can connect. So whether it's Sikh Youth Calgary getting into initiative, whether it's the Gurdwaras and other initiatives, everybody needs to know what we have and what we can mobilize to put our best foot forward. Because that's the ultimate goal and the spirit. And we heard that kind of from that marketing perspective. And it speaks of why and how we must now perform and function even within our own spaces and even greater spaces out. And so how do we present ourselves as a community? And so it's really important to know that as well. And then the last piece is to actually create a permanent place where these objects can be exhibited on a regular basis, so that almost on any given week, members of our community, the greater community, have access and can come out and share and engage. And we have done that as the Sikh Heritage Museum right now. We have a permanent gallery right now in Toronto, Mississauga. For some of you familiar with the Toronto landscape, it's in Mississauga, Malton, Mississauga. Just right next door to the Malton Gurdwara is the Great Punjab Plaza. And the spirit and intent of the gentleman who actually made that Great Punjab Plaza originally was to make it where art and business meet. And so he's been longing for us since he opened up to come in and occupy some space and engage for part of that spirit. And that's the uniqueness that we can engage in so many different places and spaces. And so we have opened up a permanent gallery right now, and we're moving into the direction of having a permanent museum, approximately 10 to 20,000 square feet, depending on the spirit of the Sangat. And speaking of spirit of Sangat, I won't cry, I won't get emotional. Mike handed me a check for $500 from one of our colleagues, Doris, towards the Sikh Heritage Museum of Canada, just on their own. This is the spirit. This is the spirit that's going to really drive us forward. And so we got a lot to look forward to. There's a lot of energy, and so thank you very much. Very appreciated. Supposed to be funny here. Okay. So much for Hockey Canada, because as you can see, this is a textbook that's used across Canada for a grade 10 Canadian history course, and somehow I managed to appear on the front cover with Diefenbaker and Trudeau and stuff. It's a fine Waldo picture kind of Pardeep, right? And what's interesting is that this literally came out, and for some of you, when Ali was speaking, and when it's almost the 10th anniversary of the Continuous Journey piece, and we're at the Hot Dogs Festival, and it was everything and anything about who I was as a Canadian, the Komagata Maru now. It was my being, and it still exists that way. So interesting, because the actual article, and I don't have it with me as part of this presentation, that's in the history textbook, the title of it says Entry Barred. And it has a picture of myself and the story of the Komagata Maru and me. And the metaphor we used was the Komagata Maru was barred entry into the Port of Vancouver, and I was barred entry into the boxing ring. So they had a picture of me with the ring behind me. And that happened literally at the moment of me seeing Ali's film and this book coming out as a reference piece. And so it just pieces that continue to inspire my story, and it's so interesting because, who would imagine I'm hanging out with Henderson and the great Canadian iconic moments of the Summit series and stuff like that as part of the journey. And as we've been sharing as part of this exhibition, Canada, Our Century, Our Story, and we are part of that story, and I think that's very powerful to start with. It gets even better if you can believe it or not. my journey in that boxing case as a national boxer, I was in the 1999 National Championships, and they were happening in Campbell River, BC. And so the article talks about Pardeep being at the National Championships in Campbell River, BC. And as challenging as it was, and my life was threatened there were also members of the Sikh community started looking for me. And so a few of them, there was a gentleman, I was hanging out, I think, at a restaurant, and he said, there's some families that are looking for you, would you mind connecting with them? And I did, similar to what I've been doing here the last 2 nights in Calgary. I'm just game for any of that piece, and so it was interesting. I connected with some families who ended up being relatives of some of my best friends back in Toronto and stuff, and so it was quite interesting. But speaking of Campbell River, what we have above us is the same piece that we had here. It's the only known Canadian Sikh soldier grave in Canada from World War I, of Bukam Singh. And what was interesting is, and I'm going to be letting some artifacts go around in some facsimiles, and Gurpreet's just going to let the attestation papers for Bukam Singh go around just for some visual reference points, and you can just kind of just take a quick look and pass them around. And what's interesting was that as we continue to research and find out of his story, I had the 8.5 by 11 printed version of those, and on the back of it, I just wrote some extra details, because my dad and mom go to Punjab every year for about 6 to 7 weeks, from February to March. And I said, Dad, you know, if you get a chance, go down, because it says Malpur Punjab on the bottom of his gravesite there. So Dad decides, so anyway, send him off. And in between that time, one of our colleagues and great researcher within the greater community, Dr. David Gray, contacts me, because we're almost weekly contacts, because we want to know what's up. What did you just find? What are you looking at? Where are you going? What's happening? Who did you meet? And he said, I was at the National Archives, and I found documents with the signature of Bukam Singh's wife on it. And that's what you see at the top there. And what's fascinating about that thumbprint piece there is that was part of the documents that were sent to Bukam Singh's family back in India once he passed away, to ask, what do you want on the gravestone? And you see it says Bukam Singh of Malpur Punjab, and no cross. You see that no cross written across there, diagonal? And he doesn't have a cross on his gravesite. And it says Malpur, but the one part that they kind of forgot, Sat Sri Akal. Right? You see that piece that they wanted at the bottom, or as part of that piece. But nevertheless, my dad comes back, and for some that know just how our parents function, never even told me he went there. No idea anything ever happened. Comes back, they just arrived, came out, put the luggages on the hallway, and he says to my mom, "Oh, go and get the photo." And my mom goes out and grabs his photo, and then Dad says, "Yeah, I went to the village." And what happens, Dad, as soon as he steps into the village, and this is village life, somebody asks him, how can I help you? Because they know he's not from that village. And he says, yeah, and he shows him some papers, and he says, you know, my son, and this and that, and Bukam Singh. Just wait 1 sec, he says. Leaves for a minute, comes back, and hands a picture of Bukam Singh to him. And this gentleman lives in Campbell River, BC. Right? How twisted that fate of that article that I showed from the beginning there. And he is married into the direct family lineage of Bukam Singh's wife. So he is from the same village of Bukam Singh, and his wife is a direct family descendant of Bukam Singh's wife. And then he starts sharing stories with my dad about letters being sent to India. And some people thought that there may be a pension in here and all the rest of that stuff. And my dad's telling me those. And it's all connected to what David had just found. And these are two isolated incidents and stories coming together as part of what's happening. And that's just this little journey of the Bukam Singh piece and story. And as we continue to engage and find out about other Sikh soldiers, and we've got their documents, and we just go line by line, because you don't know what it is that you're looking for that's going to navigate you and put you on another trail. Letters, and so there's a Toronto Star article on Bukam Singh from 1916 speaking about him, and when we put these back out afterwards, you can have a chance to read it and look at it as well. Then we find out the farm that he lived on and who was the farm owner and stuff like that. And stories will just continue, just even on Bukam Singh. And you got Warren Singh and Association papers, and a letter that was mistakenly now archived in the British Indian Archives because it was written in Gurmukhi, and they used to censor those because they didn't know what was written, and they wanted to make sure that Germany didn't intercept it and we're not talking ill. And so although he was a Canadian soldier, they just assumed he was part of all the other ones that were getting in Gurmukhi. And so it's archived there. We had found out about it, and again, David had about an hour, rushes to the archives, flipping with his wife through everything and just looking for the word Canadian, and then they catch it, right? And there becomes that piece of that, another piece of documentation and reference for us of how we kind of run around and navigate these pieces. And so what's interesting, and when I talked about sharing those resources pieces, I remember when Alice, and we were begging after the film, please put a book together for us. And he finally had a chance to go on that journey, and I'm not sure if everybody knows, but you know, just another centerpiece with Hughes working with many other colleagues around the table around Komagata Maru and Undesirables, White Cannon Komagata Maru story, must have in every single Sikh household, along with everything else we're telling you must have. But these are the types of things that have to be engaging, so our nieces, our nephews, our children are just immersed with this stuff, and they can only have a great sense of pride and take these things as far as possible. And I remember I said to Ali, I said, I brought a box almost like that over, and I said, you know, share with me your idea of the book so I know what I can provide for you or what you may need. And he's talking about, and one of the things he says is, you know, starting from the military and empire piece. And I said, you know, there's a great military historian and collector that you must connect with. Rana Singh Chinna. He goes, that's my brother-in-law. Right, because sometimes in the closest of relationships, you don't necessarily talk about who's your brother-in-law, who's your aunt, who's your uncle, who's your sister, who's your brother, right? And so, you know, and those are important moments that I want to share in terms of how we as friends and colleagues sometimes are not even into those spaces where, you know, we've known each other for years that go by and stuff. And so it was interesting because then we get into speak about a number of different things, and then his great-grandfather was at Ali that was a professional tennis player and played tennis and played against Lacoste and stuff like that. And now so those are other stories that Ali will share with you, not me. But in part of Ali's book, he talks about what's leading up to the Komagata Maru and the dynamics of that there were two issues for the government. One was to stop us from being here. So the continuous journey legislation, and you enact continuous journey legislation, and then you stop the steamship from coming over, continuous journey. The other part was, what do you do with the ones that are already here? And so Mackenzie King, the architect behind that plan to get rid of all of us and send us to the closest British territory, Belize, British Honduras, which is now Belize, and took a few of us over there, shared, and said, go back and tell your people how great it is, and you guys will all get here, and we'll help pay for everything. And they said, no, we ain't going. And a month later, literally, this original letter that we have from the Governor-General of Canada, Grey, who the Grey Cup is named after, speaks to that exact incident of trying to get us to British Honduras, and he's writing about Mackenzie King's intimate knowledge of the British Columbia position and of the methods adopted by the mischief Sikh agitators for poisoning the minds of us. Yeah, right? And again, so we start having original documentation that validates and confirms things and stories that we are aware of and know of. And, you know, because sometimes people can deny certain parts of history and navigate a different way. And so, no, Mackenzie King didn't really have that much knowledge, and he wasn't really, when someone's saying intimate knowledge, it means a whole different piece of reference. And so, when we collect and we look and we find, and again I'm going to mention David's name because he's always looking and fishing and finding, and we came across this letter from 1912. It's from the Presbyterian Church of Toronto, and it says, resolution passed at meeting of men of the congregation of Parkdale Presbyterian Church, Toronto, January 4th, 1912. That this assembly is gravely concerned to hear of the serious hindrances in the way of Sikhs and other of the races in the Indian Empire becoming satisfied and useful citizens of Canada, and would respectfully urge the government to so alter the existing conditions as to secure for our fellow British subjects reasonable access to and opportunities for residence with their families on Canadian soil, premising that in all things they will be conformable to the laws and usages of the land of their adoption. Right? And what's fascinating when you just look at this archive piece and the trail of it and the date of it and it being typed and everything else, because we were talking about Sikh Youth Calgary maybe, you know, trying to Facebook it and put some things out there. What's happening? And so this is January 4th, 1912. January 6th, the Prime Minister's office already has this letter and is forwarding it out to the appropriate department. And the seal of the Prime Minister is there in red and Borden, and it says, I enclose herewith a letter I received from Donald MacDonald together with the resolution of the Parkdale Presbyterian Church, Toronto, with respect to the Sikhs. And there's that letter dated January 5th. So the resolution gets passed on the 4th, the letter gets typed out on the 5th, and it's already in the Prime Minister's office by the 5th or 6th, which he's already dated the 6th of his letter now forwarding this out. So I don't know who that great horse carrier of the carriage was to get it down there, but just phenomenal even from that perspective. And so again it says, I have the honor to enclose you a copy of the resolution passed at a meeting of the men of the Parkdale Presbyterian Church, Toronto, in regard to the entry into our dominion of the wives and families of the Sikhs now in our dominion. The Assembly, considering the question not only from the righteous, but the imperial standpoint, were of the view that the wives and families of these men should be admitted. Just fascinating. And David and I went to go and visit the Presbyterian Church, because then that becomes the next piece. We want to share the letter. We want to know who this gentleman was, what's going on. Do we have other minutes? Where is it going? They chase us down to their archive centrally. We run down there and we keep going and going and going. And it's so interesting because these archives, these artifacts we access and acquire and stuff like that take on interesting journeys. I recently came across a Canadian Life and Resources magazine, and you'll see some of the pieces that are going around there are some original magazines related to the Komagata Maru. While I was sitting in the Port of Vancouver, the digest piece. One of the other great black and white, colorful images you see was from the Maclean's magazine. And this particular article, another type of new citizen. And it starts off by saying, you know, there's another new type of citizen arriving on our shores. You know, we do have quite good knowledge of the British and the Scottish and other people, but not too much of these people arriving from the shores of Punjab, the Sikhs. And it starts talking about the Sikh community. And what's interesting, it's a two-pager, and on the pages, on the first page too, is what's interesting is the picture of them working at the cement factories in Victoria. And I'll speak how that all weaves into collecting and artifacts and stuff. And then it ends, the article ends, and I'm going to super try. It says, what will be the outcome of this migration from crowded India to sparsely settled Western Canada? What success will these Sikhs have in a strange land, and what part will they play in the industrial life of this country? And it was interesting because when Tim Uppal had come to the Sikh Heritage Museum and we were talking about wanting to take this exhibition of the Komagata Maru around, I said, I want to answer that question now. I want to be able to answer that question and share that. And what's interesting is two paragraphs just above that last one is speaking about a Presbyterian minister hanging out with these fellow Sikhs that this author is talking to, and they're all greeting each other, and he's speaking in their language and stuff like that. And he had just spoke about the Sikhs at I think at a conference in Canada, and this is 1907 or 8 now, and so this is another tangent for us now, going and setting up that historical piece. And what was interesting was that when I was recently in Vancouver, I was carrying around Ali's book everywhere I went, and after going to Paul and meeting Joan and looking through a number of those pieces itself, and I went to go and see the Work family in Victoria, and we're looking at this picture, and they're saying, oh, there's Grandpa, there's Dad, there's Uncle so-and-so. And then they start telling me about what happened when Grandpa was working at the cement factory, and that during the night some people just went missing. Bodies were being taken out because there was some plague and disease going on, and known that the owners were making nothing public, but he was just knowing the numbers were going down, and he knew something was up. So he took our community out of there and moved out of the cement factory piece into the lumber mills. Interesting, fascinating stories that just speak and why you want to always engage in. So these resources are no longer now on your coffee tables. You just walk around with them, right? That's how important they are. And the other piece was that at the Vancouver Ross Street Gurdwara, I believe, has the tiled image of Guru Nanak from the original Gurdwara there. And I remember speaking to David because I took a picture and I was looking to maybe do a replica for our museum. And he said, yeah, you know, that was commissioned by Pardeep Singh. So right. And it's only because you talk. So we have to talk as a community. And so a lot of the things that I'm talking, sharing, and showing process is because I just want you to understand process. Right? These flow from it, but those things are just as important. Because if I don't want to talk about it, I don't take a picture, all those types of things and historical pieces and information don't become reserved and engaged. And so these are how we start navigating pieces through those some archives. And we have lots and lots to share. I was running pretty much on time right now. And for some of you who know how challenged I am technologically, this presentation was really put together by some phenomenal female who, so special thanks to them for helping me get my presentation ready. So I just want to encourage everybody to continue on this journey of learning and soak up as much information as you can, grab all the resources you can, become holders of knowledge so that you can share and spread it. We all have that responsibility, every sector of our community, and do consider institutionalizing some of these pieces. I know we talked about that concept of institution per se in terms of the youth, but they are still looking for those places in that respect in terms of where we want to go forward as a community. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.